Yeah, very good morning to you. You're welcome along this Tuesday morning to Off the Ball AM. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us, you can leave a comment wherever you're watching this, or of course you can email us am@offtheball.com for your more considered views. Owen is here this morning.
Morning, Ger.
Owen is leading you all astray this morning with our Twitter poll because it suits your narrative. We'll get to that in a minute, but before we do, we want to bring you this video, which is Alexis Sanchez's amazing unveiling. It turns out Alexis Sanchez plays the piano better than he speaks English. Jesus, it's cold up here. That's what the exhale was, right? That's what that means?
Yeah, the steam coming out of his mouth. The fact that he didn't actually play the last key on the piano obviously reveals that it wasn't actually Sanchez playing that thing. He obviously played a couple of keys in the middle, but that was it.
I mean, I think he's a very talented musician. I think he could probably pick that skill up just from looking at it, because he's that kind of, you know, he's got that inner thing that you and me don't have. That's why we end up talking about people like this. Somebody who does have that inner talent, though, is Darren Cleary, who realised that actually there was an alternative soundtrack to the Alexis Sanchez video unveiling. Have a look.
I heard that your dreams came true. Guess she gave you things I didn't give to you.
That full version is available on our... will be, at least in a couple of minutes' time, available on our Twitter handle, @OffTheBallAM, or @OffTheBall on Twitter if you want that. I don't know, I mean, I actually quite like the original. As these cheesy things go, and I realise that it's, you know, cool to go, oh, this is disgusting. What, imagine they have an media department who are making a video to, like, reach millions and millions of people.
It's not cool to think that. It's correct to think that it is cringy and awful. It is awful. It is. It's...
Communicating with your audiences all around the world, some of whom don't read press releases.
There's nothing to do with the communication aspect of
somebody
things.
holding a flag, not cringy.
You may as well go full cringe if you're going to do this. You may as well do the thing that Bristol City do whenever they have a goal scorer and do like a gif of one of their players swinging a fire extinguisher like they do. You may as well just go full cringe. This, like, trying to be iconic and trying to make this a piece of art is just stupid.
Well, it's not iconic. It's like it's just a press
they're
release.
Trying to be iconic.
It's just a press release.
It's not a press release. They got it in a full video department.
Yeah.
He did half a day filming.
Yeah.
No.
So what?
It's a press release is.
Why is everybody angry about this? I don't understand why you're like this is the.
Because he left Arsenal. That's why I'm angry about this.
Well, that's different. But like the video itself doesn't actually make any difference, right? But this is the end of the game.
It makes me cringe more than I needed to last night. So it does make a difference. It makes a difference on each and every one of our lives that we have to cringe that much at watching Alexis Sanchez pretend that he's in love with this football club.
I mean, of course he's in love with it. They're giving him 600 grand a week. He's
exactly.
Like, oh my God, they're giving me 600 grand a week. I will die for these people.
It's a materialistic affection for this football club.
Which is what all footballers have.
Not
They're
really.
Professional footballers. Their job is to play football.
Some footballers actually do really enjoy the heritage of a football club. Alexis Sanchez doesn't enjoy that.
No, they don't.
Some of them do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
They're just lying to you. You don't.
Jordan Henderson loves Liverpool.
You don't really believe
Jordan
that.
Henderson loves Liverpool.
Jordan Henderson absolutely loved Sunderland.
Yeah.
Until somebody paid 20 million quid and went, woohoo, they paid 20 million quid for me.
You can love two things.
No.
Also, the 20 million quid is going into Sunderland's coffers, not into Jordan Henderson.
But, well, he gets the equivalent, whatever that money is. However much money they made, they offer to relieve him from the purgatory of Sunderland.
Stop being so cynical. There are footballers who still love their clubs.
There aren't.
There are.
There aren't.
100% there are.
Just telling you
Jack
that.
Wilshere loves Arsenal.
Well, I'd say he would have loved Bournemouth too.
Not really.
He would have been pretty happy if Bournemouth had, like, stumped up the requisite amount of money to make him feel like, yeah, I'm nice. I'm living here on the south coast. It's close enough to be able to zip up and down to London, but far enough away that I don't have to listen to all those crappy Arsenal fans going, oh, you could have been a contender, Jack, if only you didn't smoke and get injured so much.
Yeah, well, that's all true facts, and the ironic thing is that he's getting more game time at Arsenal. There are football players love their clubs. Some of them do. Alexis Sanchez doesn't love Manchester United. Maybe he will grow to love it for what it is, but it's a load of crap right now saying that it's his favourite club or whatever.
They would all love any club who pays them the most money.
For different reasons. I mean the real affection for what a football club stands for. This isn't why Alexis Sanchez loves Manchester United. Alexis Sanchez loves Manchester United because they've got lots of money and a good fraction of that is going into his bank account.
And who are we to judge the reasons why one person...
I'm not judging, I'm just stating opinion here, and I'm not casting any aspersions on the character of Alexis Sanchez.
Right, Owen was in the office yesterday saying this is the greatest era of GOATs of all time.
Yeah, it is, and if you don't agree with me, then screw you, because I've clearly skewed all of your opinions into thinking that this is indeed the greatest era of the GOATs. Jura off air just made a very good point that I probably, if I was going to give examples of one era, I probably should have given examples of other eras, because recency bias was probably going to win this thing anyway. Or maybe I'm just 100% correct,
maybe
and my opinion is concrete and steadfast in this.
Just stick that back up there so I can read through it for you. And so Messi and Brady's performances on Sunday got us thinking.
Got me thinking.
Is the century so far the greatest era of GOATs? When you add in Tiger, Federer, etc., let us know which era you reckon has produced the most all-time greats. So GOAT stands for greatest of all time.
Yeah, it was supposed to be just this decade, but you've only got 4 options on Twitter polls. I needed to get the 1960s in for peak Ali, so...
Okay, so, alright, so the 60s is best Ali...
Pele.
Beatles. Pele's kind of... Yeah, okay. I'll give you Pele for the 60s.
And the Galway football team that did the 3 in a row.
The down football team gets in for your 55 to 70. So
better than the Galway team.
If you put examples, no, but they're like, so, you know, they're kind of, I'm not saying they're better, right? But definitely revolutionised the game in a way that maybe the Galway team was just the best proponents of it at that time. 70 to 85, you've got Kerry, Mako's Kerry.
Yeah. That's pretty much the head and shoulders winner of the Gaelic
like Beckenbauer, that German team, Johan Cruyff, Ajax. 70 to 85. Who else is in that time? Dalglish, that Liverpool team.
Yeah.
And so from, what was the third?
The third one
is 85 to 2000. I mean, did anything good happen from 85 and 2000?
Well, you got Michael Jordan.
A lot of people ran very fast.
A lot of people ran very, very fast.
Faster than a human being should run.
But we've got a faster sprinter in this particular era. So we've got the Usain Bolt GOAT. If you're gonna say the athletes of the 85 to 2000 are GOATs, then I trump you with Usain Bolt.
Yeah, I think we can trump everybody with Lance Armstrong from 2000.
Exactly.
There you go.
All those beautiful yellow jerseys.
Yeah.
We live in the greatest GOAT era ever, and as you can see with that 76%, that whopping vote already well into the lead.
Yeah. So the reason, legitimately. The reason you wanted to talk about this was because we should celebrate the fact that we have Messi for the time being. Mm-hmm. And we should embrace the Federer era while it's here.
While it's here. Although it seems to be going nowhere, given the fact that himself and Rafa Nadal are ranked 1 and 2. I don't think there's any question that Federer is the GOAT. Like, there was always that question about 10 years ago that maybe Nadal will overtake him, and if it wasn't for Nadal's blip there a couple of years ago, then he might well have done so, but it's Federer is the GOAT. And of course, Tom Brady. I mean, that is the real reason why I started to think this. It's like, oh my God, there's a reason why we stay up late on Sunday nights in January. It is to watch this amazing team. And I guess when you put coaches in there, you put Belichick in there, obviously, as well, which there's no question on the Belichick front, I think.
No. Well, no, there isn't really. I'd love to see him do it without Brady for a season or two, just to see what would happen. I mean, obviously he had that one season where Brady went down, and did they win 12 games or 13 games but didn't make the playoffs?
Maybe, I don't know, but
it must have been 10 games, didn't make the playoffs.
I do think what constitutes a GOAT as well, though, is like the dependence on other people. I think Belichick without Brady, as in you would need an outstanding quarterback to succeed, but Brady without Belichick would probably be worse than vice versa. But you also talk about like the GAA people we have in this era. Like, we've got Henry Shefflin, we've got Tommy Walsh, we've got Gooch, we've got, maybe in 2000 to 2018, you've got Maurice Fitzgerald's, one of his 2 unbelievably iconic moments. He's probably more in the previous realm.
Yeah.
You've got Peter Canavan, again, kind of the same question, is 90s Peter Canavan or 2000s Peter Canavan better? So I guess there is a bit of debate, but I just think just the sheer number of GOATs we have, even if you put in Ronaldo and Nadal, even the second tier people, and LeBron.
And so is this because of the cult of the individual? Is this because, why is this happening?
Maybe. The cult of the individual is a very good point. I think we spoke about Manchester United, and we spoke about a man who was simulating playing the piano while wearing his new jersey and walked out into the pitch. Would that have happened in any other era?
No.
I suspect not. The cult of the individual is at an all-time high, despite the fact that they don't really love the club.
And so some of these players that we're talking about aren't actually all-time greats. That they get...
It's a facade, maybe?
They get bundled in because we insist on saying that everything now is better than it was in the past, because otherwise, why would we be wasting our time on this earth alive now? That's what you're saying.
Well, everything is better now than it was in the past to a certain extent. I mean, sports science has moved on to the point where these people would beat like a hologram of if there was an exact creation of those conditions.
How it works.
I know it's not how it works, but I was taking your point literally there. Like recency bias counts for something for sure.
And more media.
More media for sure, but I still don't think there's any argument. Like, I mean, that just the sheer number. I mean, like we haven't been able to string together a whole slew of stars from a previous era that can match.
We haven't really thought about it much.
No, we haven't.
You don't want to, because it wins your argument for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so give us your thoughts on the greatest era of the GOAT. We'll bring you through the back pages in just a minute. GAA lifestyle is coming under the scrutiny again. Various people writing about the fact that we now have a bunch of players openly saying that they're choosing careers or choosing not to work at all because they want to hurl or play Gaelic football at the highest level for their counties. Diarmuid Ling's going to give us his thoughts on that a little bit later on. Sarah Rowe is going to join us in studio. She's a Mayo footballer. She's also played soccer for Ireland, and at the moment has a range of career options which would make anybody think pretty happily about their future. That's coming up in just a little while as well. And Tadhg Beirne should be playing for Ireland, according to Brian O'Driscoll. He was in studio with us on the radio last night, so we'll talk about that. Darren McGrath talking about his expectations for the 2018 season as well. Just to fill you in on what happened last night, if you missed it already, Swansea have beaten Liverpool by 1-0 in that game. Swansea obviously bottom of the table, Liverpool fresh from their sticking 4 past Manchester City. We were saying as well that this might be the best relegation battle of all time.
I think it is. I think there's 6 points separating the entire bottom half. And I stuck on the word celebrate there because I think we should celebrate this. I think it's going to be an amazing battle and one that we desperately need because the Premier League title race is over. The top 4 race could be good as well, but the relegation battle is just different level. That was a huge win last night for all of our excitement. You
were getting hammered on Facebook for doubting just how British Kyle Edmund is. He's a true, if you cut him, he bleeds red, white and blue.
Well, by getting hammered on Facebook, there was one comment who pointed out that he left South Africa when he was 3. But I didn't. That's what I said. I said he was more British than Chris Froome.
Well, Chris Froome's not very British at all.
So what? That my point is still true. Like he left when he was 3. What age was Chris Froome when he left Kenya? Like he was a teenager, wasn't he? I don't know. Semantics.
20 something, I think.
Kyle Edmund is a proper Brit, whether he wins or loses. But you do suspect that there will be kind of.
The reason we're talking about it is because he won. He beat Grigor Dimitrov in 4 sets to book his place in the semi-final of the Australian Open. Nadal against Cilic is up next.
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
And then Federer plays tomorrow.
Yes, he's in action tomorrow. We've also got our friend Tadhg Beirne, who after doing a bit of Googling...
Oh, it turns out he's an asshole.
Turns out he's a complete asshole, yeah. So screw you, Tennis. I thought your name was funny and I thought you might be a nice, amicable chap, but no, you certainly are not. You're, in fact, quite the opposite.
An alt-right dickhead.
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of like that scene in The Office where a guy comes in as Benjamin Franklin and everybody in the office suddenly realises that the guy portraying Benjamin Franklin is a bit of a creep. And Michael Scott just turns to him and he's like, Benjamin Franklin, you really turned out to be a bit of a creep. And that's kind of how I feel right now about Tadhg Beirne, but instead of a creep, he's just a bit of an alt-right, kind of aligns himself with white supremacists and stuff is what we're referring to here, which isn't great.
Nadal had a blip for a reason. The way he plays caused the injuries. Federer is the GOAT, says Noel Cowell. I mean, you can make the same case about Tiger Woods. The injuries get caused by the way he plays, and so that doesn't really diminish his standing. Jack Nicklaus says Michael Keaveney. The Nicklaus era is the... Well, it straddles 2, right? Because he wins his last one in '86, but when does he win his first one?
It's the previous one that is the peak Jack Nicklaus. And also, as well, is that a greater era of golf goats? I mean, if you've got Palmer and Nicklaus, I mean, is there...
Damaging an entire sport? Making it relevant for millions of people?
Maybe, I don't know, is that doing an injustice to Phil Mickelson? Like, there is an argument to be made that the current Phil Mickelson, the current decade's Phil Mickelson, is better than when Tiger was in his pomp. Certainly picked up a couple of extra majors.
Managed to make it like 20 years though from the year 2000 on. So like
18. It was 2000 to 2018.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's pretty like stop getting caught up in the semantics. We weren't going to do it in 18-year periods.
DJ Carey.
DJ Carey's a good shout. While those are coming in, we may as well have a quick look at some of the back pages. Alexis Sanchez dominating headlines everywhere this morning on the back of the Times Ireland edition. I didn't move for money, he says. Lol. Forward seals United deal, then turns on critics. A couple of interesting quotes in that, which we'll get to in just a moment. In the Irish Times, they're going with that story as well. Sanchez joins United, Mkhitaryan to Arsenal. The Chilean says he could not reject chance to work with Mourinho. So Jose Mourinho, not just a football club, is who Alexis Sanchez is particularly excited to work with. Meanwhile, on the back of the Irish Daily Star, Smart Alex reads the headline, Sanchez blast at Gunners' old guard. Alexis Sanchez completed his move to Manchester United before taking a swipe at his Arsenal critics. Martin Keown is the person he's referring to there, calling him a mercenary yesterday, which was an interesting word to describe Alexis Sanchez as.
I've hit the big time. At last, Sanchez, a Manchester United player, and Mickey signs for Arsenal. That's the... is Mickey, does it mean the same thing in England? I meant to ask that. I mean, do they have the same secondary meaning that we have here? Or so are the sub-editors like, the way everybody in Ireland is like?
Maybe, but it probably also has the same primary meaning, aka a man's name. So like as in like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
So I don't think people's minds go into the gutter immediately once they see that. They're like, oh, that's kind of like Mickey Mouse.
I know.
Maybe not. Maybe...
in Ireland, no.
Not in Ireland, but...
Davy Fitz disappointed over Cody's comments. We'll talk about this a little bit later on. Davy Fitz is shocked. Shocked, he says. Shocked at Brian Cody. Interesting story there as well. All Black legend admits the game will never stamp out doping. That's Sean Fitzpatrick saying that doping is always going to be an issue in rugby. Devil delight for Sanchez. Striker completes Mkhitaryan swap deal and takes over the famous number 7 jersey. That was a snub to Cristiano Ronaldo. Apparently that was one of the subplots in all this. So Ronaldo to PSG in the summer looks like it's more than likely a done deal. Parting shot, Sanchez. I left Arsenal for the same reason Thierry Henry did. Screw you, Thierry Henry. Because of course he played with Henry at Barcelona, and he's now revealing some of the inner conversations that happened when Thierry Henry arrived from Arsenal to Barcelona.
He's really thrown Henry under the bus here. We may as well just get stuck into the Alexis Sanchez story at this point. He says that, I remember today a conversation I had with Henry, a historic Arsenal player, I don't know why he has to point that out, who changed club for the same reason, and today is my turn. It's like Thierry Henry, this graceful man who, you know, his career, he would like to say, was coming to an end at Arsenal anyway. He just had to go for the Indian summer in Barcelona. No, you didn't, Thierry. You went to Barcelona because it was a far better club than Arsenal. You had this personal level of ambition which kind of outweighed what was going on at Arsenal, and I think that's fair enough. But don't try and paint this as, you know...
When Henry left, there was still a chance that Arsenal... They were still relevant in the Champions League. In a way.
They got to the final, but they had lost to Barcelona. Barcelona were still a bigger club.
Yeah, but like it wasn't the absolute titanic difference that it becomes ultimately.
No, for sure, but
it becomes that because players like Thierry Henry decide, I'm out of here.
The difference between Arsenal and Barcelona at that time is probably the same difference between Arsenal and Manchester United now. I think there's a similar gulf in class at this point, as in it's not a huge gap.
It's a huge gap between Arsenal and Man United at the minute, no?
Financially, but...
Also, like, you have a chance of winning the Champions League.
I think with
Manchester United, you don't have any chance of winning the Champions League.
I think with Sanchez, Manchester United have opened up a big gulf towards Arsenal. I think before Sanchez, and if Sanchez was at Arsenal, not a hope.
Mkhitaryan is a genius, and it turns out that they've actually won this transfer. The winners and losers thing that everybody always immediately goes to straight away, well, obviously, Alexis Sanchez is a winner no matter what happens. If he breaks his leg and never plays a minute for Manchester United, he is an absolute winner for the rest of his life because of his guaranteed contract. But Mkhitaryan might yet be a winner in this, and Arsene Wenger might also be a winner in the intermediate term. If he turns Mkhitaryan into a player who can actually keep Wenger relevant at the club and improve things. I just want to bring this Ian Wright take on the whole thing. Mover and shaker. Alexis leads New Dawn. This is something that we've been talking about for ages. If you are a player who is really good at football, why in God's name would you sign a long-term contract right now? So the new TV deal is going to be announced in the next 6 months, say, right? The expectation is that a raft of money is going to come from some of the big streaming companies, potentially Netflix, potentially Amazon, potentially Facebook or Google, who have shown some interest around the world in TV rights deals. BT desperately need and will obviously massively spend more money on it. And the Murdoch empire has just made whatever it was, 50 billion from, or however many billions it was from the sale of Fox to Disney. So they've got loads of money, and football is one of the things that they've built their entire careers on. The next rights deal is going to be huge. After that, who knows? Maybe the arse falls out of the market. But in the meantime, don't sign a contract. Just let your contract run down and take the vast majority of the transfer fee and double or treble your wages.
What if you get injured?
Buy an insurance policy. Spend like 1 million a year on insurance.
But you'll make more money off your contract.
You will not. So look at the deals. Look at the deals just done today. Kevin De Bruyne has signed a new 5-year deal, and it's for like half the money that Alexis Sanchez is on. Plus, maybe he gets a big signing on fee, a re-up bonus, but I don't think he does.
Well, I'm not sure. So Kevin De Bruyne sits down at the table with Manchester City, and he wants, let's just say he wants
500 grand.
Okay, let's say he wants 300 grand.
Let's say he wants 500 grand.
Okay, let's say he wants.
That's what Alexis Sanchez is.
Okay, let's say he wants 500 grand.
And they're like, no way, we can't afford it.
But then that's where the bartering comes in. It's like, right, sign a 4-year contract, and we'll give you your 500 grand. It's from the club's bartering. It's like we'll give you more. We'll give you more money every single week if you just extend your contract, because that way we get our compensation if you end up getting sold to whatever.
Well, so in the meantime,
I don't think it's a player's decision. I don't think Kevin De Bruyne is like, oh, I'd love a 4 or 5 year contract.
Did exactly the same thing. Well, yeah, it is. It's like, give me. Don't go into those negotiations. We want to negotiate a new deal with you. Like, no, I'm all right, thanks very much. I'm happy with the deal I'm on. I'm going to let it run out, build up my transfer value, and take all the money.
Well, I don't think somebody like De Bruyne and well, maybe Sanchez is, because he's only got one more contract after this, really, in Premier League. So for De Bruyne, though, he's the best player in the Premier League. Why is he? Why does he want a long-term contract? I don't get it. Like, I think a young player who needs some sort of security, or an old player who similarly needs that sort of security, on the two ends of the spectrum.
Buy an insurance policy.
Okay, I'm not going to lie. I haven't really looked into insurance policies here, so I can't say that you'll make more money off an insurance policy than you will off the compensation of your contract. But I'm not sure. Maybe you're right. I'm going to take your word for it that the insurance policy will actually work out in your favour financially, but I highly doubt it.
Yeah, only if you get injured. But like most players don't get injured. Most players actually survive and play out their contracts.
But you never know. Crystal Palace could come and hunt you down. Jason Punchin can be running behind you on a football pitch and end your career there and then.
And at that point, your insurance kicks in and you get paid whatever the value you've.
I get what an insurance policy is, yeah. But. Yeah, I don't know, basically. My point is that I'm not sure does that actually give you...
Don't sign a contract. If you're Kevin De Bruyne, like you could have 50 million at whenever that last contract was due to run out. Real Madrid will give you 50 million quid to come and sign for them in cash in one day if you want it. Or they'll give you 10 million a year on top of the 10 million a year they'll give you in your salary, or 12 million a year or 14 million a year. It's coming.
Yeah, maybe. I want to point out some of the social media figures when it comes to this transfer yesterday, because we obviously had 3 big pieces of news yesterday. We had Sanchez, we had Mkhitaryan, and as you say, we had Kevin De Bruyne. It's no surprise that Alexis Sanchez was the most successful social media story yesterday. 30 minutes after being announced on Twitter, The Times reports that Sanchez' tweet had 77,740 retweets, 84,298 likes. The Mkhitaryan tweet announcing him had 20,671 retweets, 24,983 likes, and in the De Bruyne news, but it was only a contract, unsurprisingly only had 2,000 retweets and 3,500 likes. So Sanchez basically is getting the better deal here than Mkhitaryan if likes and retweets are to go by. And also, in better news from Manchester United, they think they're throwing away too much money on Alexis Sanchez. They're still the richest club in Europe, and they will be for the foreseeable future. Their 2016-17 revenue is £581 million. 2 million more than Real Madrid. So it's actually neck and neck right at the top of Deloitte's European richest clubs. Barcelona is in at 3rd, Bayern Munich 4th, Manchester City at 5th, and Arsenal are in at 6th, which is surprising yet unsurprising, the fact that they've got so many pounds and pounds and pounds of money in reserve, and they're going to do nothing with it. They're richer, it says, in terms of revenue than PSG, Chelsea, Liverpool and Juventus.
So if you're the owner, if you're in any way involved, you think Arsene Wenger is an absolute genius.
Completely. I've been saying that all along. The owners love Arsene Wenger. Arsene Wenger is the first... He is the most successful business model of a Premier League manager that will ever exist. A steady line. And with the fluctuating or the growing TV revenue, the Champions League money doesn't matter. It balances itself out. That line is straighter and straighter.
And also the Europa League actually ended up being quite important. Man United made 40 million quid in prize money from that for winning that last year, which put them over Real Madrid, which, I mean, I'm sure at some point, somewhere in the boardroom is getting a bit of a bonus for finishing top of that list, because I guess you've got to incentivise your executives somehow. Right, let's move on. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, you can tweet us at Off The Ball. We'll come back to some of the other big stories in the newspapers, including the Davy versus Cody spat from the touchline last weekend. Davy saying nothing about it, and then goes on to say quite a bit about it in the papers this morning. So we'll get to that, as I said, a little bit later on. And we're also going to hear from Darren McGrath, the Waterford manager. But first, we're talking about this issue that so many GAA players have spoken about, the work-life balance and the complete absence of it. And then also the whole notion that because there's no balance to it, players are choosing careers. Jamie Barron talked about becoming a teacher, saying that the lifestyle would be much more suited to being an inter-county hurler, and that his family were advising him to do that. And you also had another couple of examples recently. Lee Chin, for example, saying that he wasn't working at the moment and that he was happy that way because it's going to help him become a better hurler. Dermot Ling, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, Ger. How are you?
I'm very well. Congratulations on the new arrival.
Yeah. Thus, I'm in my dressing gown here. Sleep is a thing of the past, it seems. But good to be up and about. This time it's just getting bright here in Aunaskal, so I'm all good.
This is an issue I particularly wanted to talk to you about because obviously you've got a lot of experience of it. You were a teacher while you were kind of in the absolute peak of your inter-county career, and that lifestyle, that decision to become a teacher, was that something that you had chosen specifically because you wanted to be an inter-county hurler, or did you have the vocation to be a teacher and that actually it was just a nice coincidence?
Yeah, it was a nice coincidence. I didn't. It definitely. I realised very quickly it was a vocation. And reading Jamie Barron's comments and reading comments about this over the years too, where people are saying increasingly that it is just that teaching suits inter-county playing, as well as there are plenty of people who I think maybe subconsciously go into teaching with half days and summer holidays in mind, but. For any of those people, I mean, you see them straight away when you go into classrooms. You know that they're struggling because there's a job to be done there. And I wouldn't look at that. I wouldn't look on it definitely very favourably to speak about it because it's disrespectful to the job and to the vocation that it is. And it's an important role and vocation as well. So I definitely don't buy that. However, there are obviously, for some people it definitely just does suit them, and that goes hand in hand with inter-county hurling and football then.
Yeah, I kind of feel exactly the same as you, to be honest, that this is a fairly dangerous path to be advising people to go into a career that you've got the responsibility for increasingly large numbers of kids on a day-to-day basis, and that if you're sitting there really all you want to do is be out training, then it's not fair on them and it's not actually any good for you in the long run.
Yeah, no, it's not. One of the things that it kind of develops in it, I think, is an idea of counting down time, and again, it's working kind of at a deep level, but I think counting down time because you're looking forward to a training session, a gym session, a match at the weekend, this feeling of, you get through this to get something else done, and that's fine for yourself, and there is long-term implications, but at the end of the day you choose that, so you have to deal with those long-term implications. However, the 30 people who are in front of you, and they are 30 people, they're not just 30 children, they are people, they haven't chosen that, and they haven't chosen that kind of overarching feeling over them. Now look at, again, I'm not saying that's what the amount of inter-county footballers and hurlers in the country who are teachers and top of the pile as regards teachers as well, no doubt about it. However, if that becomes part of the conversation and that's kind of thrown about as if that's in any way normal and in any way acceptable, I mean, we're definitely going down the wrong track then. Yeah,
and we should definitely say that there are a bunch of teachers who we would both know who have been absolutely dedicated to it, who when their hurling or football career finishes are absolutely thrilled to get back into the classroom and have that proper vocation. So totally understand that, and totally understand too that some people just pick the wrong job by accident because career guidance isn't something that we really value highly as a society, stupidly, and we need to do more about that. But this kind of notion that you can just hop in there, do this for a few years, and then you'll be grand. I don't think it has the player at the centre of that conversation either. It's like, you're just doing this thing. And maybe if we move it beyond teaching, like the Lee Chin situation, I think is particularly worrying because this is clearly an unbelievably gifted and intelligent guy who is actually missing out on a couple of years of his career here where he could be developing a strand of his career and his future at the same time as he's developing his hurling skills.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is an interesting one for me, Ger, because I don't really value a career very highly, to be honest. And that's, that it probably goes against the grain a little bit. But I think, as you were saying, we don't value too much maybe career guidance in the country. I I'm not so sure about that, but definitely there are people who are chained to desks doing jobs, letting their life force wear away, doing something they don't want to be doing. And certainly Lee Chin, who's out in the field or who's in a gym or who's looking after himself well, is in 10 times a better place than any of those people, to my mind. It's concerning in a way. I mean, 12 years ago, Tony Griffin did it for Clare and he won an All-Star. There are always people in elite sport who are going to take it to a different level, and there is always, and regardless of whether it's club, county or whatever it is, there's elite levels, and these guys are at elite levels. And Lee Chin, I mean, is undoubtedly, and has been since he was a young fella, really the elite level of what physical preparation and an awareness of what needed to be done to be an inter-county hurler. So I'm not surprised to see Lee going that little bit further. And I mean, it's also to be commended in one sense, because I think that to survive on less, obviously, Lee can do maybe a couple of days work here and there. I don't know, maybe he opens up something, or maybe he cuts a ribbon somewhere and he gets paid a few bob, and then he just can survive on less. And I think the idea of going after him more and more is a bit of a fallacy as well. What we're concerned about, I suppose, in the GAA, and why we're probably chatting about it more, is that are these conditions being created around the game where this is being facilitated more and more, where players and probably managers as well, and you're going to be talking to Derek, so you get an insight into that, but where the demands of the game are, this is just becoming more and more the norm. And we're not really, I don't feel we're at that point really yet in terms of players turning pro in their preparation, but in many other areas, I mean, we obviously are at that point. We're at the point of the threshold of break point. We seem to be around that, because the demands on players' lives and their personal lives, and the data backs this up. It's to say that there's a huge imbalance, and I suppose what Lee Chin is trying to do to address that imbalance is to take away something that we'd all kind of accept in the long run, and with a little bit more experience you look back and say, maybe Lee should maybe we should address a different one. Maybe a job is actually a little bit more important, because you do have to develop as a person.
Is it too straightforward to just say that an unbelievably successful hurling career would lead to better career opportunities, and by not doing anything of that sort of level at the moment, from Chin's perspective, from not studying, from not getting into a career, he is therefore enhancing his chances of winning an All-Ireland, and will therefore increase his chances of having an amazing legacy, and therefore potentially creating his chances of getting into a career as a result? I wouldn't say directly as a result of his hurling career, but certainly there's nothing wrong with increasing your profile to the level that Joe Canning is now at as a result of last year's All-Ireland win.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree, and I think anyway, aside from increasing your profile and the language that goes around what an inter-county career is now, I think people who make bold choices are always going to be seen as people who make bold choices, and they are needed and necessary in the world. And so if Lee Chin pursues this in the way that he's committed to, what's to say when it comes to work in the future, that he wouldn't take an option or maybe an offer that others might go away from. This is just the nature of the beast. I think that the free thinkers are very valuable in that way, if that's what it is. But there are plenty, and you're both right. Like, there are plenty, and I've seen them all around the country, who think that being an inter-county hurler, or who think that their legacy is going to get them by afterwards. But the fall at 32 and 33, when the curtains fall, is great, and that is not the case, regardless of your legacy and how. And there's any number of players coming to mind, and who obviously I'm not going to say in public, but there are plenty of players come to mind who I thought, I mean, their legacy is unbreakable and unshatterable, and it'll continue forever. And in one sense, in the hurling community, in the hurling world, maybe it will. But I mean, the hurling world is really only on when you're at training and when you're at games and when we're on off the ball talking about hurling. But other than that, people are just doing their thing. They're living their lives. They're not really as interested in the legacy of what this guy could do once. And I think the country has more of those people than we would like to admit. They occupy the role of hero for a lot of people, but for themselves, maybe that there's a vacuum that's created by at times decisions like this that Lee is maybe making, putting inter-county hurling football too far ahead of everything else, and that balance that I think Michael Duignan was writing about yesterday is what's being called for. I still don't think it's about individual players making decisions like that. The overall, what we all feel, and I think it's very, very clear, we all feel as if we're going to remain as an amateur organisation with an amateur status at inter-county level. We have to restore balance back to the club game, and we try and rein in the runaway elite level of inter-county, and I think maybe that's what's behind this a little bit more.
I think exactly that, and maybe that takes us away a little bit from the specifics of the situations with regards to the individuals we're talking about. And we're just using them as a stepping off point here before people start going, oh, stop talking about the individuals, because I know there's always a massive backlash against anybody talking about the private lives, effectively, of these players who, for whatever reason, we all feel a certain ownership of, and they're public figures in some way, but ultimately they really aren't, and that's not what we're trying to do here. We're definitely trying to have that more broad conversation. So
no,
maybe
for sure. We've had this conversation plenty of times, and I know where you stand on it, and it's one of the reasons I'm always drawn to you in conversations about these things. Like, you know, there is, when you have that, I suppose, respect, and it is a very healthy respect for players. It's out of that respect that you don't want them to be at 33 and 34 in that vacuum. I mean, that's the essence of why we're really talking about it in terms of the individual, and I think that's fair game then, because it's out of a place of respect, you know.
Okay, exactly. And so we've had these conversations for quite a long period of time. Are we beginning to get to a place where more people understand that this is too important to be left to young men in their early 20s who are being told that the be all and end all of your life is to get an All-Ireland medal, when ultimately so many people who you speak to who've done that look around the stadium and go, is that it? Is this what everything was about?
Which is the common line that I've heard after an All-Ireland win, and I've only heard about it, unfortunately, but yeah, I've heard it a few times. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately as well, as it happens, and I think it's maybe it's going to come to, I think in one of the articles during the week they were talking about how the manager, you know, it might have been Michael Duignan again, actually, the manager had to be reined in, or it was the manager's influence, it was the manager who everything was really at the plate of the manager, and I think that they're already within a certain sphere that they have to ply their trade within that sphere, and I don't think that's going to change. I actually think that it's going to come down to the player, and the more the player is told all of these things, you know, about how to live their life, and the more they're cocooned, and I think this mirrors the greater society anyway, to be honest, the more you're kind of cocooned in your own life, the less you realise the freedoms that you have. And so for a player, for players to step back from what they're being told, and being told kind of excessively so, with rigid controls put in place about their social lives and their private lives, their personal lives, outside of just, you know, the white lines. I think until players stand up with a degree of unity, and I'd like to see that maybe leadership coming from, you would have to say it's at the responsibility of the GPA, but they're going to go with what their players want, and if the players are still very much within that tight-knit circle, they're less inclined to go for it too. But I think until the education comes to the player, where and people around the game, which is what essentially we're doing, where people around the game talk about the game in a way that they will look up, or they will step back and rethink about why they got involved, or what the balance used to be, or how much they actually used to maybe care for the game before it became this extreme controlling force in their lives. And they start standing up and saying, no, we're not doing that. We're going to take a week or two to go on holidays in April or in May, or whenever it is they want to go. I'm not feeling well this week, I'm going to take a week off. And that the players assume the mantle of responsibility for their own lives, that will in some way readdress what will happen. Now, obviously, in the early stages of that, you've got one player stands up and everybody else kind of keeps the head down, and he's gone off the panel, and some other machine comes in who will agree to everything that the manager says. But that can really only last for so long. I think once a players and a group of players, and I think they're increasingly become a little bit more awakened as to the realities of what's happening around them. I think that maybe they're the ones that can restore the balance, because the GAA don't seem to be able to get a hold of this, and the GPA as a mandate from their players don't seem to be either. Whereas from the outside, it definitely seems like a lot of people are very, very clear about the imbalance and about what has to happen, and for just the overall health of the organisation and the game, and particularly the club game. It's like that's going to happen soon, I think, because we have hit a very extreme level of invasiveness into their personal lives, and maybe the likes of Lee's decision are a result of that, you know.
Just in terms of affecting change through education and the power of the GPA to do this, like they can always be doing more to change things, but ultimately, as Dignan points out in his piece in the Mail on Sunday at the weekend, if there's a growing trend of elitism in the GAA, it is because the very top teams are doing it, and naturally the top teams are growing a gap on the rest will start to follow. So could we use that logic in terms of career progression and mindfulness and, I suppose, progressing your life off the pitch a little bit, that if we focus on the elite teams and suddenly the rest of the county is seeing the Dublins of the world in football, for example, like living their life with good solid careers that aren't just focused on their inter-county career, the rest might actually follow, and they won't see a good life off the pitch focused on career success as a deterrent to football or hurling success.
Yeah, I think Dublin are very interesting from that point of view. I completely agree. They seem to have, and Jim Gavin seems to have it installed, and as the culture of their team definitely seems to be much more towards a balanced life. And again, you've got one of the if not the top proponent in the game coming onto the show this morning, Derek McGrath, to talk about it as well. The balance and the care for the player outside of the team maybe ultimately serves the team anyway, so maybe there are the same end goals there. But for the Dublin case, it's interesting because they definitely are pushing these fellas to be to excel in business as well, or as entrepreneurs, or whatever it is. Sometimes I'd have questions as to the amount of how much that crosses over with their GAA persona. And how much dependent the type of work that they're doing is on their GAA persona. And I think this is where the danger lies. And I think this is the thing that we've all probably seen at different times when we meet people who are former greats, is that it ends and you can't trade on this thing that you used to trade on, and that creates a fall. So I don't know long term, when you look at the level that Dublin are trying to develop their players as people, I think definitely you've got a better chance with that. That's with that level of engagement with the game, with how much they put into it, knowing that there's an All-Ireland medal not far away. For Roscommon and Leitrim, for Wexford, would you have that same? Could you ever get that same buy-in to a team, to a machine like that? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they're dragging it the wrong way. Maybe they're going too much towards it. Maybe too much sponsorship, too much branding. Maybe this is forwarding things down towards a more professional route at the same time. So I don't know that. Just looking in from the outside at the Dublin, at how Dublin work, there are hugely positive things, but for the game overall, sometimes I think that maybe they're going the same way as, and I'm pretty open about this, obviously, like the kind of Sky Sports version of what GAA is, that suits their model as well.
Gizzy, what's the answer?
Sorry, Ger?
What's the answer?
I think the answer, Ger, is because you can't go backwards ever, and there's never any desire to go backwards, and rightfully so. I think that a shift in focus, like, it's not a capitalism communism thing. Like, it's a scale, and we've just tipped that scale too far towards the elite professional game, because that benefits too many people who have vested interest in the GAA at the moment. They've gotten in under the surface of the GAA, and now the decisions that are made are going to be impacted by those people as well, or by consideration for those people, because they've invested money in the organisation, because they've invested money and money that goes back to grassroots level and everything else. But as soon as you have corporate interests being represented ahead of the organisation that represents all of us, which are the people of the GAA, who are the supporters and who are the members, players, fans, whatever. I think that yeah, I think we're seeing the results of that. We're seeing a slide towards the focus is on the elite side of the game, and I think that until we're able, and I think there's also actually a very pressing demand, and we're always talking about these things in a greater social context. Rural Ireland, towns, villages, parishes around the country, and this is another issue in GAA at the moment as well, who are struggling to field teams, who are struggling to have enough of a fabric of identity in their area to be able to field a team, to feel that your area is even worthy of staying in, as opposed to just running straight off to Dublin whenever you get to the age of working. That I think that the GAA's great opportunity at the moment is actually by refocusing a little bit more on the club game. We see how well propaganda essentially works with sports fans. I mean, you've got the Heineken Cup and things like that. You just put it out and build it up in a certain way, and people go towards it over time. I think if we refocus a little bit more on the club game, I think that will work as the natural handbrake to that runaway kind of elitism. And that will also give great value back to local areas where people are kind of proud of their area and proud of their team and proud of their place, and maybe less inclined to just run to Dublin at the first chance of a decent career. That they may work for their area, and there may be more of an instigation to create something in their area because of that identity that they share with it. And when that's lessened by the top table, and that's what's happening in GAA, there's no doubt about that. There's a lessening of the value of what a local team is so we can have all of this value put on what an inter-county team is. I mean, that's where the balance is off, and I think that restoration of that balance is essential. I don't think there's any other word to it. It's absolutely essential for the health of the GAA going forward as a cultural organisation that has withheld and upheld a certain place and certain values in Irish society. That people do have problems with at times, and they're certainly not always on the money. They can be backward at times and a bit too traditional and maybe a bit too careful at times. But they have upheld some really fantastic things about Irishness, and not as a national identity, not in a nationalistic sense, but just the people who live in Ireland and the type of things that they do, that you would give all of this time freely to educate young players on how to play your native game. I mean, these fellas aren't ripping anybody off. Like, this is not a bad thing that they're doing. This is good stuff. So I think that needs to be protected and should be protected. And corporate interests, we see the trouble that they're causing kind of everywhere else, and I don't think that's quite as befitting for us.
Gizzy, great thoughtful stuff as ever. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Ger.
And congratulations on becoming a dad again. Right.
Davy Fitzgerald, Brian Cody, the first GAA feud of the year. It is upon us. Davy Fitz, yesterday in coaching his LIT side against DCU in the Fitzgibbon Cup, was asked about these questions that Brian Cody was put to the grill on Saturday evening after that Walsh Cup win for Wexford after that shootout. Cody not happy with Wexford players bawling to the ref.
So one of the Wexford players got his helmet grabbed, which is obviously a straight red card.
Yes.
But his sin is telling the referee that he had his helmet grabbed.
Well, he didn't get sent off because the player told him. There was obviously some sort of other evidence to back that up. So either he saw it or the linesman saw it. And it's helmet interference. We've seen it so much in the last 12 months. You're gone. You're going to get done for it. And I think Davy is a little bit bemused, or at least he's trying to give off the effect that he's bemused by Cody's comments, he said about Cody that he hasn't lost a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. Why is he talking about this and stuff? Cody maybe a little bit annoyed after the game. Is it strange that somebody gets so annoyed after a Walsh Cup final? I think so. It doesn't seem a very rational thing to have a go at the Wexford players for the way they were bawling towards the ref. But maybe they were. Like, we weren't on the sideline. Maybe there was this effort from Wexford players to get, Kilkenny players in the bad books. Maybe there was an effort to get in the grill of the referees. But if that's one of the tactics you're going to employ to be Kilkenny, then so be it.
So what did Davy have to say about all this?
Davy isn't, as I said there, he says that Brian Cody hasn't lost very much in the last 10, 15 years. Basically suggesting that Cody's comments are as a result of a little bit of bitterness that,
he's a bad loser.
He can't take the defeat. It's 3 losses he's had to Davy Fitz now. Maybe, he's just got to face up to the fact that I'm a better manager than you, Brian, and you've got to come back with a little bit more grace next time we beat you.
What do you think Davy's motivation for this is?
Oh, well, I don't know. maybe to lay down a marker, get the mental warfare started, because he feels that could be a place where he could have the better of Brian Cody on a consistent basis. Maybe in the media, when Davy Fitz is going guns out to actually defeat somebody, he will probably win that battle, especially when Brian Cody is as shrewd as he is and shrewdly quiet in the media.
See, if he's shrewd though, then he's actually winning, right? He's like, I'm very interested to see exactly how this plays out, because Cody clearly was animated after losing a Walsh Cup match, and it's unusual for him to be so animated and to specify something like this where, you know, the players weren't being manly effectively. They were like whining to the referee.
Yeah.
You can't be doing that, right? That's the code is you can't be whining to the referee, particularly about like somebody grabbing your helmet. Now, if he decapitates you with the hurl, fair enough, you can probably go, ref, he just took my head off with the hurl. But when it's a simple grab, that's the Warriors code, right?
As in, yeah, you keep it stum unless there's actually some sort of physical damage done to your well-being.
And even then, you're supposed to be like, it's grand, that's hurling.
If this turns into a feud, is this the first Brian Cody feud publicly with a manager? Like, now, granted, there's a key component here that we haven't got yet, which is Brian Cody hitting back at Davy. Brian Cody never really had a go at Davy. It was more to do with the players, and he was just a little bit unhappy with how they behaved. So to call this a feud is patently incorrect right now.
No. It's the first feud of the summer. First, you already said it.
I said we might have the first feud.
I'm backing you up here. No, you're right. We've got the first tribal war in the Babylon.
What we need is Brian Cody to come out and slam Davy Fitz in extraordinary comments splashed across the back pages over the next few days. That's what we need for this to escalate into a Jose versus Conte.
My money's on the Independent tomorrow. That's the first thing I'm going to be going to tomorrow morning to see what's going to happen. Let's bring you through the rest of the newspapers and some of the other stories. Sanchez, obviously. Ian Wright, we've mentioned this. Ian Wright thinks that, oh, wow, this is the first time you're ever going to see players running down their contracts to make loads of money. I'm like, surely players have been doing this for a number of years now, and every player who is well advised by anybody who cares about them, including their agents, will be advising players to run down their contracts. Manchester United are the richest club in Europe. We've talked about this. Just pipping Real Madrid by about $1.5 million ultimately. 580 odd million in revenue in 2017. These are the 2017 figures we're getting?
Yeah, 16-17, yeah.
Okay. The skills versus endurance story.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Christy O'Connor today in the Times speaking to Ashley Jones just about... I guess it's just been such a big topic over the last couple of days, and I think we kind of disagreed with this yesterday over Joe Brolly and Colin O'Rourke's comments about players maybe going backwards in terms of skills because there's too much endurance training this time of year. Well, if you listen to Ashley Jones, who of course used to work with the All Blacks, then you would suggest that the GAA needs to be doing more. He talks about the fact that it can go better and it can go higher because everyone in the GAA is not a full-time professional. You don't have the opportunity to sit down with a player and completely individualise their programme. That leads to a degree of generic type programming that essentially not only can it go further and more can be done, it's been done in the wrong way. And I think that ties in a little bit with Brendan Bugler's column for AIB last week.
Absolutely.
That there is this sort of whole mentality around the team, despite the fact that you'll have a 32-year-old and a 21-year-old on the same team. They don't need to be treated the same way, particularly when it comes to endurance. He was referring to team meetings. So it's an interesting one that he said. He also says, I think we place far too much emphasis on strength and conditioning and nowhere near enough on skill development. I see a lot of rugby programs turning out big robotic players who can't catch and pass. You just wonder if because we have done such a good job of getting players into such good physical state that we've actually created a bit of Frankenstein's monster. He's referring to rugby there, but obviously it's in a GAA context because he was speaking at the coaching conference in Croke Park recently. And it's thoughtful stuff. Get the final quote then on this. Gaelic football and hurling needs to focus more too on strengthening the neck areas, especially with how physical the games have become. He says that some of the programs in rugby haven't been doing neck strengthening, which is leading to a lot of obvious injuries. Like the one I can think of in particular is Cian Healy, for example, with his neck, which looked like an awful injury at the time. You'd suspect the neck strengthening is all well and good in that regard, but we know how bad those injuries can be. Yeah. And if there is negligence in that area across the globe in rugby, then there are going to be problems. But he reckons it could be a bit of an issue when it comes to hurling, which is an interesting one. I've never really heard of neck issues being a problem in GAA. Just
speaking about the individualised training sessions, that was one of the points that Darragh Conan was making when we spoke to him after he retired on the radio, and he just felt that he was doing exactly the same training as everybody else, despite the fact that he had a very specific injury profile. And I do think that strength and conditioning is one of those areas where there's a sense when you don't really think about strength and conditioning that it's like a drill sergeant getting 15 and 16-year-olds out to do laps. But ultimately, if counties started building up a proper profile of the players in their development squads, and I know development squads are supposed to be the spawn of Satan, but if they did start building up proper profiles of these players and then getting those players to keep a record of what they've done, you could start saying, okay, you've actually done too much this week. You need to calm that down a little bit. And it's about trust and it's about sharing data and all those issues. But I'm sure if you work those out properly, that you could get to a point where you weren't overloading players over a 10-year period. So the 15-year-old joins a program, and by the time they're 25, they're doing 2 sessions a week, but they're at that level of base level of fitness that they need to be, and the manager goes and is told this is what they're doing this week, as opposed to going, get out there and do those laps and break your balls.
Also, I think it's so important when it comes to the GAA and the staggered introduction of players throughout the year, that you look at any team now and if they're involved in their club, they're not going to be back for another few weeks. People said that the club is less intense than the county, but then you need your off season, you need your couple of weeks off, and for them to just all be thrown into the one bucket and brought up to speed as if the season starts like nothing had ever happened in April, for example, or something, then you're in a bit of trouble there. It's just basically the antithesis of science. The other gem from that piece is that Richie McCaw was always asked who's the best flanker in the world, and he used to never say himself, so that humility is actually real. There's one other piece as well today. It's John Fogarty in the Irish Examiner after Mikey Sheehy's comments last week, and I wouldn't say John Fogarty's backing him up, but certainly gives a little bit more nuance to the whole situation here about the animalistic intent of Kerry fans.
Are you the roughest type of fucking animals?
Yes. No, not really. Sometimes. It's actually a very good intro by Fogarty here. He says it's 15 years to the month since Paddy's comments, and he says perhaps some sort of unofficial statute of limitations had elapsed, as Sheehy felt compelled, as Paddy O'Shea to take aim at the Kerry supporter as well. Take aim he did. And Fogarty's take is that, well, first of all, he points out 2014 when everybody was writing Kerry off, and he quotes James O'Donoghue here, which I'd completely forgotten about, before the Munster final, saying it's tough being down in Kerry sometimes with that sort of stuff because Kerry people are so forthcoming with their opinions. You ask if they're going to the game, they'll say, nah, why would I go down to see him get bait? And
that's like James O'Donoghue asking people, are you coming to watch us play? He's like, no.
Yeah.
To watch you getting beaten at the gate. No thanks.
That takes a lot of gumption to say that what will become the player of the year that time, but
or idiocy.
Idiocy mainly, I guess. The other thing then as well is
you're saying Kerry fans are idiots, Owen. Is that that's what I'm hearing you say?
Not at all. Not at all.
You can drop quote that. That's the.
Why would I call myself an idiot? John Fogarty then as well points to Mayo, actually, because obviously this sparked because of Kerry Mayo and the replay last year, and he talks about Mayo support, and he says 4 years ago, I completely forgot about this, James Horan noted how quiet the Mayo following became in the closing stages of the 2013 final loss to Dublin. Later that year, the Mayo 51 club was established with the aim of encouraging more colour and noise. The fruits of their labour are now being seen. They and Dublin are the only football teams who have sold out their season ticket quota, and the argument will be that the Kerry's thirst for success isn't as strong as that for Mayo, but the brickbats flung at Fitzmaurice, Sheehy and others at the tail of 2017 fly in the face of that, which is also a very good point. You say, oh well, Kerry don't care about it anymore, they don't have as much passion as Mayo. Well, you go down to Kerry during a cold long winter when they haven't won the All-Ireland or get beaten off the park by Mayo, and you'll see how much passion actually does exist when it comes to anger.
So this is a concerted effort by the management team to re-engage the fans and to make them be part of Croke Park in August next year.
Exactly, yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's nothing like to stoke a bit of fire in a Kerry man, like just making them angry.
Francis Bellew, not the Francie Bellew, says, re-GAA lifestyles, players have chosen not to work and instead concentrate on their game for years now. They were called sales reps. Hey-oh. And then at PP O'Leary says, would you like your kid taught by a hurler or a teacher who's only in it for the short days and the holidays? No, definitely not. That's the whole point. And so, I mean, Darren McGrath is a pains to point out that he feels that there's a vocational element to the lads who are on the Waterford team who are teaching, and if that's the case, then fair enough. But advising people to go into it because the hours are good, so it's going to help your inter-county career, in the long run, does not have the benefits or the best interests of those people at heart. Because if you talk to a bunch of inter-county players who are coming to the end of their careers, who just did the teaching to be inter-county players, they're like desperate to get out of it. Like, I know several of them who are like, oh, geez, I don't actually really like teaching.
It's disrespectful to the teaching profession as well.
Yeah, totally.
Also, as well on the Lee Chin thing, I wonder if there's an element of him that's thinking there's no rush. I'll sort my career out when I'm in the right mind space to do so. And now isn't the right mind space to do so.
Maybe, and maybe he's like reading, and maybe he's just taking a bit of time to actually decide what it is that he wants to spend the next 40 years of his life doing. And that's totally fair enough as well. You just hope that he's getting advice when it comes to careers. Like you brought up the Dubs to Gizzy, and it was a good point. They do have people come in and actually do career advice. Like that was Paul Flynn came in and said when Pacquiao Rowe was the manager, they actually sat him down and said, well, like this is your skill set here, and these are the things you really like doing. So have you thought about this, and this? And that kind of really helped him to go back as a mature student. And ultimately, he doesn't become a teacher, but he does go and have that experience of being in college as somebody who then gets a first in his course. Like, these are high achievers who, if you help them do other things and actually say that there should be a balance here and you should be using this time to become a better human being, then you can do these things all at the same time.
Absolutely. I just wonder why that hasn't kind of filtered down to the rest of the counties, because everybody follows the Dubs as they should be when it comes to strength and conditioning and fitness and things like that. Why isn't it being followed in terms of general life? But that, at the same time, though, we don't actually know. Well, we don't really know the ins and outs of a lot of county teams. Maybe it is being done, and it'll just take a bit longer for it to filter down to the rest of the counties.
Okay, well, it's definitely been done in some counties, but clearly it isn't in others. So this is our poll. Owen's botched poll. This is our final result, where he's totally skewed it in favour of himself.
I like the way whoever took the screenshot of that voted for 1985 to 2000 just to try and balance things up a little bit. Tommy outside was who did that. But yeah, it's great how propaganda works. This is a great example. Somebody
else was saying Michael Schumacher. When was this?
Of course, yeah. Schumacher would be
90s.
Early 2000s. Late 90s, early 2000s, yeah.
Again, he kind of straddles those two. Roy Keane, obviously, up to 2001 is his absolute peak, I would argue. Well, 99 also, he was amazing. So, again, he straddles it. If you hadn't been so prescriptive with your measurements here and had gone like, 2010 to 2018, that would have been your thing to do, right?
But you can only have 4 options on Twitter. I wanted to include the 1960s to ensure Ali was in there, but that clearly has no bearing whatsoever on anybody.
Phil Taylor, obviously. What a great human being Phil Taylor is. What a marvellous advertisement for his game he is.
Also a 90s, to a certain extent. A 90s success story.
Is that when he...
Well, half and half, really, I guess we can say.
All right. Right, more hurling. Oisin popped down to Croke Park yesterday for the launch of the Allianz National Hurling Leagues and sat down with the Waterford manager, Derek McGrath. Here's McGrath on how Waterford are set for the 2018 season.
Yeah, it's a fair point. You take the scenario whereby you approach the league in a kind of a relaxed manner, not a relaxed manner, but a manner whereby you have in the bank, if you like, and that's a possibility with us now. I was at the Kilkenny-Wexford match on Saturday, and the intensity levels were huge, and Wexford have been playing and Kilkenny consistently nearly the same teams all along, albeit Lee Chin and Conor MacDonald only came on at the end of the game. But you can see their focus in terms of mental preparation and physical preparation. They're certainly a team best prepped or best set up to attack the league, if you like. So that's very obvious. So I don't think Waterford are ever in a situation whereby they can be confident enough to say, oh, we're going to approach the league, as I said, in a manner whereby it doesn't really matter. I don't think we've reached that stage. But what I do think is that there will be evidence within the league of the trying of personnel perhaps that haven't got a huge amount of game time from match to match, and it'll be planned as opposed to a reactive sense to whether we lose to Wexford, how we line up against Tip. It'll be kind of planned with the championship in mind, because I think we're all a little bit foolhardy when it comes to the championship layout. We're going to need, people talk about squads and squad building. We would point to the fact that Tommy Ryan's impact in games last year was due to the fact that he played so well in Galway against Galway in the quarter-final of the league. So there's a planning phase there whereby guys have to have some introduction to the inter-county setup. And I think you can see that. If you look at all the pre-season league games, with the approach of Kilkenny, Limerick, Cork, there's been a freshening up of the squads. And I think that freshening up will bring a certain level of hunger perhaps that was lacking with every squad into the league, So I don't think there'll be a dilution of the league in terms of the effort and the actual intensity of the games, but there may be a dilution in terms of the personnel that you're using mightn't be, they mightn't be up to the pace of it, and they may take time to get up to the pace of it. So I think that's just the nature of planning. But I think we can live with that. Other years, as I said before, when we were relegated in 1A in my first year in charge, you'd be under the duvet for a couple of days after not listening to local radio, not listening to anything. But I think the reality is now a more cold, as I said, analysis of it. Colm Callanan's inside Galway, won it from 1B last year. Clare won it from 1B the year before. We won it from 1B the year before. You know, Wexford had massive progress from 1B. So I think, you know, I think there's a certain realism has to be taken into account in terms of where you stand at the end of it, you know.
And what about the new championship format? How difficult or otherwise is that going to be? Is it something that you're looking forward to? I was going to ask what you make of it, but there's no point in that. It's there, whether people like it or not. Patrick Horgan, for example, the Cork hurler, told me last week that he actually finds it difficult to recover between games. It can take a couple of days, and that means that the work you do between games won't be as much as it normally would be in the championship. So how does it affect things? What effect will that new format have?
Yeah, look, I'm excited by it, to be honest with you. You know, I think, look, there's good people working in the Hurling Development Committee that have, you know, proposed these ideas, and, you know, there's a reason why they're doing them, I suppose. I think it's like anything, I think, you know, it's like the debate around ourselves and how we play, or it's like the debate about anything, you know, it's if it becomes ingrained in people's mindset, well, then sometimes people that mightn't have any understanding of it are inclined to say, like, already I would hear whisperings of, I think the crowds will be down. I think, you know, we'll have to look at this, you know, there'll be dead rubber games at the end of it. We know all these things now, and if we can factor into a little bit of open-mindedness in terms of where we store that information, as opposed to coming with that straight away in advance of it, both in media circles and as management, as players, embrace it, go for it, you know. The only scenario I think that's not an issue, but is, and I've been quoted on this already, is we played our first round of a championship last year on the 18th of June. This year we're playing our last championship match on the 17th of June. So technically, you know, I would like to see it a little bit later, stall later, even from exam purposes, you know, to have these on the 20th of May, the first round in the Munster Championship, and I think it's even the 13th in Leinster. You know, I'd imagine those with third level exams there'll be a little bit of kind of, you know, a balance to be struck there in terms of third level exams, and, you know, things like that. I'd like to see it go a little bit later, but I think we should embrace it. I think there's a definite emphasis on the planning, for instance, during February and March. Like, for instance, we're playing Clare in our first game. You could have a scenario whereby you're making the changes for the tip game in Welsh Park based on squad rotation and a kind of a new approach, if you like.
So the new championship format definitely has an impact on the Alliance League and how you plan for that, I guess.
It does, because you're preparing essentially for two leagues. You're preparing for, you know, it's a different scenario. You know, with the window there now for the clubs where the probability is that there'll be 3 championship matches in Waterford, we say on the 1st and the 8th and the 15th of April, three championship matches, depending on the structural changes, if anything, at County Board meeting tonight. There'll be a new approach, and it's ensuring that there's never a loss of your effort levels, and there's a buy-in from everybody in terms of, you know, where you're going to go and how you're going to go about it. But, you know, the adage that it's all about the panel, I don't think it'll ever be truer than when it comes to this year's championship, you know. It
sounds like it's going to be very tough for managers, because if April is a club month, that means you don't have your players and you're trying to prep them for the championship in a round-robin format. I know, for example, Stephen Rochford and Mayo has a very early championship game. I think they're playing Galway in mid-May. Now, that's not ideal for him if he doesn't get his players back till the end of April. Where does it sit with you? Would you like to get your players back a bit earlier? I appreciate that clubs have to get their go as well, and we all know that, but ultimately, as an inter-county manager, you want as much time as you can to prepare your players, and if they're going to be gone for a lot of April, that's going to make things difficult for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, I think the myth that surrounds the cult of a manager whereby they're all demanding and all conquering in terms of decision making at board level or indeed at club level, for me it's a myth. You know, it's getting the balance right there between, like, we would hope, like, for instance, that the hurling matches that are penciled in for April in Waterford will take place on the 1st and 8th of April, thereby on the 15th, thereby releasing the players sounds like a bloody prison, but on the 22nd of April, and you'd have a 5-week run-in, which is, you can't complain at all about that. So,
and you need that time as a manager, don't you? You absolutely, as an elite squad, which is what you are, you need that time. It would be ridiculous to think that you don't.
Yeah, and I think that's the message that has to be imparted at times. You know, the whole debate that surrounds the club player being isolated. I managed De La Salle for the 2 years, De La Salle senior team, before I became the Waterford manager for the 2 years, and my genuine and my realistic impression from the whole setup, if you like, was that the players, the irony of it is, I found when I was involved in De La Salle, the players actually they didn't want the game during the summer. You know, so the message that's out there about the clubs don't know when they're playing. From my experience, and that's only a personal experience, was that the month of July certainly was a month where they didn't want games.
I think club players didn't want.
The club players they didn't actually want. They wanted to kind of, when can I book my holidays? They wanted to kind of, and I think that's the argument from the CPAs. They want a structured phase whereby guys can say, well, listen, I'm on 8 to 4 shift for the next few weeks, but my holidays are last week in July, first week in August. Can I book a holiday then? And my planning around when I was De La Salle manager was to have a couple of pre-seasons. You go for a certain amount of time, you play or two out into your championship, and you might take a 5-week break and come back again. And for me and for our players in De La Salle, that suited the players. Whereas I think the message sometimes being conveyed is that it doesn't suit the players. And I think ultimately there's a kind of a mixed message there at times, you know.
Yeah, always great stuff from Derek McGrath. Really interesting person who gives very much in these interviews. There's another good 10-12 minutes of that conversation between Oisín and Derek available. We'll stick that up on youtube.com/off the ball. Make sure you subscribe there, because that's where we put most of our longer form stuff as well. Now, Mayo GAA star and former Irish international Sarah Rowe popped into studio for a chat ahead of the start of the Little Ladies Football Leagues. We started by chatting about her time with the Irish under-19 side that reached the semi-final of the European Championships, and whether she'd ever like to pursue a career in an American university if the opportunity arose. Like, obviously, we'll talk about the football, but to start maybe with the soccer, you played with the Ireland under-19s that reached the semi-final of the Euros, and I just know from talking to people around the setup that there was a lot of those, that team who were offered scholarships and who were kind of just generally talking to American universities. Is that an option for you? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it was kind of always a possibility the last few years, and there's a guy from Atlanta who's been on to me kind of every Christmas. He comes over and we meet up and we chat, and I've been kind of saying the last few years, yeah, I'll come over next year, and it was kind of in the pipeline to do a master's over there. So there is that option. I'm not sure now if I'm going to take it or not, because there's options as well with the AFL, and so that's kind of coming into it as well. So I'll kind of see over the next few months what I want to do.
Wow. Which AFL team is it?
Melbourne Football Club is the big one at the minute, but there's a few offers, and I was meant to actually go over in January, but things didn't fall into place, and with the league starting very soon and stuff, I kind of have to take a step back from thinking about any of that yet. But I think we might get a few weeks off in May, hopefully, and maybe I might get over then and have a look around.
Okay, right. So all of a sudden, like, most people who play sport in Ireland, particularly who play GAA, like, there's that window of opportunity. Maybe if an Aussie Rules team comes in for you at 17, 18, 19 and that's it closed, but like every summer you have an option for soccer or now for Aussie Rules.
Yeah, see, the window with the Aussie Rules actually works out really well, and it kind of accommodates to play football and to play AFL. So I could technically go over in the end of September, October, and then come back in March and I suppose finish out the league and play championship. If I suppose your team allowed you to do that, you could do that. But I think next year and the year after there's going to start being more AFL games, so it mightn't be as easy to do. But at the moment, that's the way the season falls. So it kind of, whereas soccer now, the season used to be kind of September to around May, but now it starts in January and it doesn't finish till September. So it doesn't really accommodate for me to play both.
That's college soccer?
That's Shells.
Okay, sorry, Okay, and so if you did go to the States to do college, is that something that's kind of fallen off your radar totally?
Not completely, but it's kind of more of a situation that you have to up and leave everything here, whereas if you go with the AFL option, you can kind of...
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, best of both worlds, but the soccer is definitely an option. It's something I really want to do at some point, and I don't want to look back and kind of regret that I didn't do it. So,
and can you do everything? Like, is it possible you can do a bit of AFL for a couple of seasons and then go back to the soccer and go? Because, like, I know the NCAA have strict rules about professionalism, but, like, you wouldn't have been a professional soccer player, so it's not like you couldn't go back and do...
No, I could go play AFL and then I could go over the year after, say, and do a Masters maybe and play with the college soccer team over there or play with the club over there, and that would be professional. But I'm not really sure about the whole, I suppose, going back soccer, being out of it kind of the last year now. You have a lot of work to do before you get back into it, and I'd have to be playing consistently, like day in, day out, and I think I'd have to go back to Shells first for a while, get your touch back and all that, and then kind of decide.
What would be the pathway if you did go over to the States, like in terms of a professional career? Because we all know about the national team being so successful in the States. Is the club setup just as impressive over there?
I don't think it's as impressive. I think if you really wanted to make it in soccer, you'd have to go to England and to play with one of the bigger teams. Like my friend Katie McCabe, who's on the under-19 team, like she was over at Arsenal and then she went to Glasgow to kind of regain a bit of confidence and back again to Arsenal. So I think that's where it would be better if you really wanted to go professional. If I wanted to go over and maybe further my education, probably America is a better idea.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of a master's in American college is pretty sweet, getting paid, and the way that they look after their sports teams is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is, and the scholarships are worth an awful lot more than they are over here. So Megan Connolly, another girl who went over from a young age after the under-19 campaign, she's really enjoyed it, and Megan Campbell as well. So they seem to not want to come home since they went. So I suppose if you go over, you might be stuck there as well.
Yeah, no, it would be awful to be stuck in Atlanta, one of the best places in the world to live, apparently. So obviously those options are amazing. Let's go back and then talk a bit about Mayo, because it was I guess an exciting year last year. Like, ultimately, when you lose an All-Ireland final, there's always going to be regrets, but the team is thereabouts, and like, I don't know if you have to be a competitor to reach the level that you're at, so it's going to hurt, but at the same time, now with a bit of distance, you get to go, well, that was alright.
Yeah, well, for me personally, it was my first All-Ireland final, second time ever playing in Croke Park. Well, third time. I played at half-time when I was younger, but I don't really count that. So, second time properly playing in Croke Park. And for me, while losing was horrible and no one likes to lose to the Dubs, it was also a really good experience and a massive learning curve for me. I suppose if you were to go into it again next year, you'd have a completely different mind frame about it, and there was an awful lot of hype and a lot of attention and all that probably could have distracted us a small bit because it was all new to us. But it was a really good experience, and it was something you obviously dreamed of as a kid, and especially with the record attendance, thanks to Lidl, I suppose, with the 46,000, that really improved things. And I think the standard of the game is consistently improving as well. And so, yeah, I suppose look forward to this year and hope that we can compete again as well as we did last year. But I suppose we have to fix a few things first. Because
the hype is like a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? Yeah. It's so important that the game has that, and it's been so productive for the game. But then also, as you say, it can become something that can really let you down on the big day. But it is something I presume you'll be able to handle a lot better if you get to an All-Ireland again. Yeah, completely. I suppose you go out into the pitch and, like training every day, you can hear someone saying, "Here, Sarah, pass the ball." You can't hear a thing when you're on playing in Croke Park, and I suppose we probably weren't as prepared for things like that as we should have been, and that all only comes with experience. Like the likes of Cora and Tadhg Beirne and stuff had warned us of that, but I suppose you don't really realise it until you actually go out and play yourself. Yeah, because you see in the Blues Sisters documentary, the minutiae they were like actually exposed in terms of doing the parade beforehand and playing the national anthem. I don't think they managed to simulate some like thousands and thousands of people and the deafening roar of Croke Park, but they went down to the very small details. Did you learn from watching that a little bit? Well, I suppose we actually did do that ourselves as well. Okay. So I think when we looked at the document, I suppose we actually did an awful lot of things that the Dubs did as well. So in terms of not taking boxes and stuff, it probably wasn't really the case. It's the psychology of it, really, that you get sucked into a little bit? Yeah, I think it's small, but you have to, and there's a lot of young girls in our team as well, and we really weren't prepared for that, and it was a massive day, and I suppose, again, you weren't expecting the crowd that came, so that probably did have a factor in it, and I also don't think we really kind of did ourselves justice on the day. When do you become aware of the crowd? Like, at what point? Is it pre-match where you're going, holy moly? Well, you walked out, when you run out into the pitch at the start, you're like, whoa, and then it was kind of when you were doing the warm-up and you could see people pointing fingers, but you kind of couldn't understand what they were trying to say to you. So that's when it really became evident to me that I was like, you really have to go on your instinct today, kind of thing. You talked about the increased profile of the game and how that's happened to attract players and just the general raise in standards in recent years, because reading a piece from a couple of years back, you were talking about how at one point you really thought soccer was going to be your game, that it felt like you got better treatment, you got better gear, and it just felt a little bit more professional. So is there a specific point that you can pinpoint and go, well, the Mayo operation changed at that moment, and from then on I was like, actually this is different? Yes, so Frank came in 3 years ago, and I was playing with Ireland at the time, and I was playing with Shells, and I was playing with Mayo, and I was trying to train something crazy like 13 times a week, and I suppose like everyone wants to be selfish and everyone wants to say, here, we need you here, we need you there. So I was kind of being torn between both stools, and I was like, what do I do? So I picked the soccer. I played with Ireland that summer, and I played in the World Student Games in South Korea. And I came back and I was like closely following the Mayo girls, and they lost Kerry, I think, by 5 or 6 points in the quarter final, and I was kind of like,
geez, I didn't like not being there, and I didn't like what I was missing, and things didn't go great for them that year at all. But since then it's changed massively, and that year they started to gather things, like small things started to become better, and then the year after it was another significant improvement, and then we lost to Dublin by a point, and then it was kind of like, geez, we are closer than we think. And then we upped it again and raised the standards again, and so I think from about 2 years ago it started to really improve. Like, you know, we're getting mostly everything you wanted. You had, like, you know, access to physio, access to ice baths, food, all that. So it just kind of, once when there's a good setup in place, it's funny how girls respond a lot better to you know, if things aren't going well. Like, you can have the most talented team in the world, but you do need a good setup, and you need to know the people are behind you, and you need to know that, you know, going forward, that if you need anything, that you just have to turn up and play football, and that's all you have to do. So it's consistently been good, and I think Dublin as well raised standards as well this year with Mick Bowen coming in, and seems to be very professional for them as well.
There's almost like, it's a strange one when you look at the men's game at the moment, and people are trying to roll back on the elitism, whereas at the moment with women's football it seems that every bit of elitism that can be achieved should be taken, and it should be taken with two hands, because there still is a bit to go. It just seems strange to me that we do have this sort of I don't know, this divergence in values maybe, and I'm not sure. I don't think the men's game is going to go that way, where elitism will stop progressing, but there's certainly been calls for it.
Yeah, I suppose, because they're trying to work full-time jobs as well at the same time, and that's not easy. And like, what's been demanded of men's and women's, I suppose men's, this has been going on for a good few years now, but only for me in the last 2 years I realised that it's literally a full-time job. You're waking up every morning, you're like, what kind of training do I have to do today? What kind of recovery do I have to do? What do I eat today? Like, it's consistently on your mind, so it takes up a lot of your headspace as well as going to work and trying to, some boys are trying to run a family, some people have kids, you know, it's an awful lot to ask, and I suppose that's probably why you're trying to pull back in a small bit, but it's way too competitive. It's not going to be pulled back. I can only see it going the other way, and I suppose more money being pumped into it as well, and more interest, and a lot more games in Croke Park, so I can't see it being pulled back at all, and I hope that the ladies will continue to improve.
You said you had 2 games in Croke Park. Was that the first one? Was the double header last year, was it?
Yeah, the league game,
And I think that was the first ever double header, was it?
Yeah, first ever.
And it worked really well. It was a brilliant game. It went back and forth. You guys won in the end?
Yeah, we won by a point.
Came from like 5 or 6 points down with a couple of minutes left to go, was it? Yeah. So that was a great game, and that's obviously a brilliant showcase for, like, okay, so let's start doing these. And the world didn't fall apart when the first double header happened. So I think there's 8 in over the next league campaign, and you guys have 2 of them. Yeah.
We've won with the Galway men and Galway women in Pearse Park, and then Pearse Stadium, and then we have one in McHale Park, the double header against the Dubs. I'd say that'll be a sellout.
Yeah, so that's class, right?
Yeah, it's very good. Like, it really does. Again, it keeps, like, the league sometimes can be a bit of, you know, sometimes you feel like you're going through the motions sometimes, and it's hard to kind of stay motivated. Like, it's a long time, like, away from championship, and that is ultimately the main goal. But things like that will keep everyone really on their toes and really interested in girls fighting for positions, which again raises the standards.
Just that mention of the Dubs there, that got a smirk out of you. Like, I mean, is that you look at Cork and Kilkenny in the Camogie, and like, I think it's just so open that there is, I'm not going to say the word hatred, but there's a very healthy rivalry, let's just say. Maybe on the outside we don't appreciate your relationship with Dublin, and there is not tension there, but something along those lines, because you've only played it in one All-Ireland final that we've actually seen this thing happen in Croke Park. So is there something more there? Is there a long-running thing at all? Is it just respect?
I think it's just a rivalry thing, and like, I play with a lot of them in college with DCU as well, so like, I'm great friends with an awful lot of the Dublin girls, but obviously there is a complete rivalry, and you know, it's healthy rivalry, and it's because they're good and because we compete against them all the time. And I suppose with the men's as well, obviously, you know that Mayo are diehard supporters, and I suppose we'd be on the back of going to the men's games as well and seeing that rivalry as well, so probably heightens our rivalry as well. So yeah, there is
hatred is the right word.
Yeah. I didn't want to say it, but it is really, isn't it?
No hatred.
Well, listen, best of luck. And do you know when that decision about the AFL gets made, or what's the schedule for that?
The plan was to go over now this month and have a look. I want to see it for myself. I don't want to go over blind and kind of say, yeah, I'll go here, I'll go there. There is a few options. Melbourne Football Club is the main one at the minute, but there's other options as well. So I want to go over and weigh it up and kind of see things and then make a decision from there. But hopefully, I'll have to definitely have made a decision by around June. So
right.
I'll just kind of keep my options open till
It's
then.
nice. They're pretty good options to have, though.
Yeah, very good.
Somewhere in Atlanta, or a couple of years in Atlanta, or somewhere in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Just back in time for the championship. Who knows?
Should put up a Twitter poll and get listeners to suggest what the ultimate decision should be.
Sarah, great stuff. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Owen's obsessed with Twitter polls. He likes to skew them, though.
That would have been a terrible idea. Taking somebody's life and decisions into your hands via Twitter. Well,
People doing a coin flip, right?
Yeah, I guess this morning's Twitter poll was an important life decision for me, just to affirm my belief that this is the greatest sporting era of individuals ever. So
Yeah, but the sporting era is defined randomly as the cut-off point from one millennium to the next.
No, the millennium until now.
Yeah.
But that's not a random cut-off point. It's pretty obvious that 2000 is quite a definite starting point. It is literally a new millennium.
Yeah, but time is a flat circle invented by human beings.
Yeah, I go by the Gregorian calendar or whatever this one is.
Nothing is a vocation anymore, says Lenny Clark. People these days work a job they like or choose to make money, and that's it. I mean, probably it's a fair point, Lenny, but it would be good if people liked their hard work that they do as a public servant. Paula Halloran says, contracts mean nothing these days, kids. Kevin De Bruyne will get another pay rise this time next year to stop Barcelona or Madrid from signing him. He will get another pay rise, but eventually City will probably cash in on him. That transfer fee will be 150 million.
Hold on, they're not going to cash in on Kevin De Bruyne.
At some point. At some point, De Bruyne will not be... When Pep leaves or whoever comes in, De Bruyne has a falling out, they get somebody who they think is slightly better. Whatever. At some point, he may well leave. He's not Leo Messi. He's going to stay there for the rest of his life.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
If the ownership leaves Manchester City, he might leave. But anyway, continue.
The likelihood is he'll leave because everybody else leaves.
I disagree, but continue.
At some point, they'll want to cash in, and they'll take the value back that they've paid him. He should get that money. He should take that money himself. By signing the contract, he can never get that money. It's simple economics. It's the whole point of the Bosman.
Unless we're now in the era of trades and no money will ever be offered.
Well, I'm amazed that clubs haven't tried this before. It's like, let's swap this really owner's contract for another owner's contract. That one's got 2 years left. Okay, I'm not going to give any money for that. The clubs also are a cartel trying to keep the money in the ownership as opposed to giving it to the players, but they haven't done a brilliant job of it so far. Jean Renahan. There you go.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
The old 9 o'clock slump.
It's 10 past. It's a job. Who cares if they love their club? And then Michael Carr makes an excellent point. Does anybody really love their employer? Footballers, for some mad reason, are expected to love theirs. I love my employer. I love working for Off the Ball.
Yeah. My point was not that we should be criticising them for not loving them. I'm just stating it as fact. They don't love their football clubs. I think there was a point when a lot of footballers did, and I do think some of them do exist still.
No. You can't back away from this crappy... From this little island that you're dying on.
And I'm not backing away from it.
Footballers love their clubs. That's what you said earlier. And it was the general consensus was all footballers love all clubs.
But that's just untrue. I didn't say that.
I think if we look back, everybody's going to find that is pretty much it.
Grant, you can look back at it afterwards. I'm saying that I think you will actually have a better career if you love your football club. If you've got another thing to fight for.
There's no balance when it comes to club versus county. It's always the county that has first dibs on players. County guys now don't even train with their club. Surely it's time to exclude county players from club competition.
Well,
I mean,
that'd be a step. Who's going to produce the players now? And if the clubs I presume the clubs in hand would just be like, screw you,
That would
county.
be the official split. That would be we now have a full-time elite and we have the club game, and maybe there's something in that at some level. But I think, look, we've started a debate there on that this morning. We haven't started a debate. We've continued the debate that has been absolutely raging. But Gizzy has always made some pretty interesting points. So if you missed that, you can get it on our youtube.com/Off the Ball or Facebook as well. Tonight on Off the Ball, the amazing story of Anthony Crolla, who is a boxer who interrupted a break-in at his neighbour's house, gets assaulted with a concrete block, and comes back and finds his way in the ring again. An amazing story from him. Graham Hunter in studio, and the outgoing Director General of the GAA, Pádraig Duffy, will join Joe in studio this evening as well. So a really good show from 7 o'clock tonight on News Talk. Tomorrow morning here on Off the Ball, we're going to bring you a series of interviews over the coming days about the sexual abuse scandal that took place in Irish swimming. We're going to focus particularly on the US-based George Gibney. Later this week, we're going to bring you our piece with the American investigative journalist Irvin Muchnick, who's been covering Gibney's movement in the United States for the best part of half a decade now, and has spent much longer even than that working on the sex abuse scandal in American swimming. Tomorrow, we're going to talk to the former Irish Olympic swimmer and orthopaedic surgeon Dr. Gary O'Toole about his role in exposing the horrific sexual abuse that took place in Irish swimming. For now, though, that's pretty much all we've got time for. We're going to leave you here with a clip of our interview with the UFC star Darren Till. This has been exploding on YouTube for us. Have a look at it. This full piece goes live today, but here he is on his young start in professional fighting.
Your first pro fight was when you were 15, is that correct?
Yeah, 15.
So what do you remember from that event, from that kind of experience of going in there for the first time?
I was 15. It was in Scotland. It was in the Greenbank Stadium, the Greenbank Hall, sorry. It was against a guy called John O'Loughley. Was it John O'Loughley? And he was 26, I was 15. And just ended up beating him to death. And then it went from there, didn't it?
Yeah, so when you're going in against 26-year-old, is there any bit in your head that's kind of going, you know, what have I got myself into here? Have I ended up here? Or are you just going in there?
No, I like fighting, mate. I really like fighting. I don't really care who it's against. Like, I don't mind getting hurt. Like, I don't mind. Like, a lot of times people say, I'll die in that cage, but do they really mean it? Like, I really mean it. Like, I really deep down mean it. So, I don't really care who it's against, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then kind of moving on, say your first MMA match fight in a cage. What age were you when that happened, when you transitioned over?
I was amateur, I was 17. It was in the Olympia in Liverpool. I had 4 amateur fights. I won them all, and then obviously I made the move over to Brazil, and then I went professional over in Brazil, and then I came back. So yeah, first MMA amateur, first professional MMA fight was at 20. First professional amateur was at 17. So like a 3-year, you know.
And do you have any particular memories of that night, or first time being in a cage? How that felt different to a ring?
Yeah, it felt different. I remember the guy. I've got a scar on my head. The guy like gave me a good wallop on the head, and then I just seen red, and I was like, oh, we're having it now, son. And then obviously my first professional was in Brazil, and it was against like one of the good guys in the area, and like he was saying he was going to beat me in that, and I beat him on points. And then you know, just from there, I can remember vividly every fight I've ever had in my life.
Really?
I just have memories. I can near enough remember all the names of the guys I fought, even the guys who beat me. So, you know, it doesn't something like that, a spectacle like that can never leave you. So there's always a vivid memory, you know what I mean?
When you think about the experience of kind of getting yourself sized up for a fight and making the walk, does that change along the way as the kind of you're working your way up the food chain, or is it always the same?
Not really. It's just business. At the end of the day, it's just fighting for something, fighting for what you set out to do. It's like with me, I just don't really care about the pressure or the nerves or you know, like I get scared when I go into a fight, but I just don't care. I block it out and I'm ready to go in and have it. Like that's how I see it. I just think, let's go, let's have it.